The Twilight Zone. A general consensus would lead you to believe that it's a sci-fi show. It's true that it does offer up plenty of science fiction-based episodes for its viewers, but maybe, just maybe, The Twilight Zone is more suited for horror fans. I'm about to show you 10 reasons why any horror fan, whether you prefer your horror to be supernatural, psychological, slasher, paranormal, whatever, has a reason to revisit the classic 1960s series,
The Twilight Zone.
Old Man in the Cave, horror subgenre, apocalyptic horror. The Twilight Zone is no stranger to worlds in which civilization as we know it have been destroyed, but Season 5's The Old Man in the Cave should be of particular interest to horror fans, who find movies like Day of the Dead, Chosen Survivors, or Hidden among their favorites. The story follows a tiny community of people who have managed to survive a bleak world contaminated by nuclear fallout, through the guidance and warnings of a wise recluse who only one of the townspeople has ever seen.
What about the food? Wait till Goldsmith gets back from the cave. Wait till he has a chance to ask the old man.
We're told that this old man has never led the survivors astray, but when a militia rolls into town, the complacency of this settlement is quickly disturbed, and the clash between two purported saviors threatens to destroy what's left of humanity.
Mister, I have killed 100 times you. That's how I've stayed alive.
The new exhibit, horror subgenre, slasher. Of all the terrible fates to befall Twilight Zone characters, trapped in an alien zoo, having your face turned into a Halloween mask, spending an eternity in a cornfield, being hacked and slashed is actually pretty uncommon for the show. Except in the Season 4 double-length episode, The New Exhibit. Just like 1982's Alone in the Dark, Hell Night, or just about every Scream movie, they weren't content with a single slasher, so this episode gives us 5 wax figures of history's infamous murderers who are saved from a museum's foreclosure by a curator and kept in his basement. To his wife's distaste, the curator's devotion to the statues borders on obsession. He racks up a hefty electric bill keeping them cool, fixates on the upkeep of their outfits, and speaks about them as though they were close friends, even justifying their crimes. And when they come alive and begin to rack up a body count, he covers up for them.
If I went to prison, as I probably would, who would take care of the figures?
In his image, horror subgenre, sci-fi horror. I recognize that pointing out one particular sci-fi horror episode of The Twilight Zone is pretty redundant. There are more sci-fi episodes of the series than horror, and plenty that mix the two genres. But let me clarify, Season 4's In His Image is cut from the same cloth as Videodrome, The Clonus Horror, and Upgrade, wherein the source of the terror comes from within a man who is the subject of an experiment, the details of which are a conspiracy that is revealed as it warps his life. Another double-length episode for most of its runtime, we're just as unsure about what's going on as the protagonist is. While presented as a mild-mannered, successful man in love with a happy, supportive woman, what was supposed to be a normal trip back to his hometown soon calls everything that either of them know about his past into question. One thing he knows that she doesn't is that he's been driven to kill by something within his subconscious before, and if they can't find the link to his true origins, then he may succumb to it again.
Go now, Jess! Run!
A Thing About Machines, horror subgenre, supernatural. The thing about the machines in this Season 2 episode is, they're not supposed to be moving around, at least not like this. Rather than being tech horror in the usual sense, this episode shares more in common with your average evil car, evil TV, evil washing machine, evil tire, whatever movie than it does a true sci-fi horror hybrid. There is no explanation, rational or even irrational, for how the inanimate objects in A Thing About Machines have come to life. All we know is that its main character does what countless characters in possessed object flicks do, and royally screws himself by admitting to people that he thinks his appliances have come to life, and acting like a dick about it, so that they leave him to face his tormentors on his own.
Aside from being a rather incompetent clod, you're a very unreceptive man.
The Invaders. Horror subgenre, killer doll. You might think that with an episode entitled Living Doll, the Twilight Zone pick for a killer doll fan would be obvious. But let's be real. When you think of a killer doll movie, do you think of a regular looking toy driving a man to insanity with its words? Or do you think of Blade and Torch messing up the old redneck bitch in Puppet Master 2? Season 2's The Invaders, despite being about little men from a flying saucer, is basically an extended version of that scene, but you could just as easily draw comparisons to the Child's Play series, or the most famous segment from Trilogy of Terror. Light on dialogue for a TZ episode, it's a straightforward suspense piece that segues from first encounter directly into a fight for survival, as two terrors from another world skulk the corners of an old woman's isolated home in the sticks. While their initial attacks only sting her, the duo are unrelenting, crafty, and seem almost impossible to catch, whittling down her endurance bit by bit, forcing her to learn to be a predator or face becoming their prey. Come wander with me. Horror subgenre, backwoods horror. Before you get too excited, no, there's not an obscure Twilight Zone episode dealing with hideous mutant cannibals. Think more of the Restrained, Hunter's Blood, Deliverance, or even Calvaire side of things. Season 5's Come Wander With Me has a supernatural bent, but it still presents the classic setup of a dumb city boy meddling where he doesn't belong, in this case, the past. Floyd Burney, a name he'll remind you of constantly.
I'm Floyd Burney. Floyd Burney, you know.
Travels to the backcountry in order to get authentic material for a new folk rock song. But when he finds his muse, he learns that he can't just pay for her story with money. And that's when things get too real. As anyone with sense knows, people in the country are possessive of what belongs to them, and Floyd learns too late that if you want part of that, then you'd better be ready to become a permanent resident.
Help me. You gotta help me, old man. You gotta hide me.
Last Rites of Jeff Myrtlebank. Horror subgenre, comedic horror. This Season 3 episode is your basic story of a man who comes back from the grave wrong. Except in this case, the fear surrounding his resurrection appears to stem from the fact that the title character is a harder worker, lighter eater, and all around more of a Chad since popping up alive at his own funeral.
If I had a dime for every time I whopped you, I'd have $100. That's right. But you ain't whooped me lately.
The resurrection of Jeff Myrtlebank takes moments that could be unsettling given its premise, and instead plays them for laughs at the expense of an antagonistic town that seems to wish they were right about the good-natured Jeff being the vessel for a malicious hate, until they realize that provoking him may just be playing with fire. In the vein of Life After Beth, Dead Heat, or Death Becomes Her, it's a horror comedy that turns everything you expect from a story about the undead on its head.
Morgan, your jaw ain't broke. You wouldn't be trying to talk so much. You ought to do something about that dander.
Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, horror subgenre, creature feature. The second of 2 TZ episodes starring William Shatner. In this one, he plays a man recovering from a nervous breakdown that he suffered on a long-distance flight. Now, he's back on a plane, but this time his nervousness is justified when he sees a humanoid flying monster touch down on the wing and begin single-mindedly tearing its mechanisms apart. And as the creature always disappears before he can prove its existence to anyone else, it's up to him to stop it. If you're a fan of monster movies, particularly ones that take place with the victims on a conveyance with the beast just outside, like The Monster, Jeepers Creepers 2, and Altitude, this is one that's essential viewing.
There's a man out there. What?
Look, he's crawling on...
Long Distance Call, horror subgenre, haunting. Not to be confused with Season 5's Night Call, although that's also a damn fine haunting episode. Season 2's Long Distance Call boasts the darker premise and heavier suspense factor between the two of them. In it, a young boy is given a toy telephone by his embittered grandmother shortly before she passes. The boy's parents, having already been reluctant to let their son know that his grandmother didn't have long for this world, are beset with a whole new series of worries when it seems that the old woman is speaking to the boy from beyond the grave. And beyond telling stories and playing games, she's teaching him how he can join her.
I asked him why he did a crazy thing like that, running out in the middle of a busy street. He said somebody told him to.
For the fans of The Innocents, Dark Water, or The Sixth Sense, in which the dead imperil those who have barely begun to live, Long Distance Call is a ghost story that is truly haunting.
Give him back. Give him back, Mom.
The Fever, horror subgenre, psychological horror. This was the hardest subgenre to come up with a Twilight Zone episode to represent, because there's so damn many that would actually fit the bill. I just realized I didn't put any Season 1 episodes on the list yet, and The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street would be too damn obvious. Just like Love Object, Exhibit A, or Combat Shock, Season 1's The Fever is a film in which the horror is spurred forward by its main character's own choices. When a morally uptight man goes to Las Vegas with his wife, he breaks down and decides to gamble just once. Only when he's a winner the first time out, he convinces himself to go again, and again, and again, until he's on the brink of losing everything in one chaotic night, and starts to believe the machine that he's obsessed with is also obsessed with him.
I've seen a lot of them get hooked before, but never like him.
If you happen to have the Twilight Zone playing this New Year's Eve, horror fam, wait for one of these episodes to come on and tell me in the comments below if it cured your fever for your favorite subgenre. Whether you love slashers, ghosts, demons, or anything else that's scary, The Zone has something in store for you, just as it has for everyone. And we'll have something scary to show you as well next time on Look Horror, Listen Horror, Talk Horror.